So my name is Damon Gameau. I am the director of That Sugar Film and 2040, both documentaries. So I've spent the last 8 years really looking at the impacts of sugar on the body, the tactics of the food industry, and also trying to find some of the best ecological solutions to our current dilemma. And I'd say that the common thread with both those films is that we're really not going to fix anything by addressing or tinkering around the edges of our system. That basically we have a very flawed model that is producing these symptoms that we're seeing. It's a model that is largely based on competition and extraction, and that competitive nature is not bringing out the best in us, our human characteristics, but it's certainly not helping us in terms of the planet or our own health. So a great example is, for example, the food industry. You have companies like Nestle that are employing hundreds of PhD scientists to find out the best ways to hook us on certain foods, the mouthfeel, how do we trigger certain dopamine in the brain, because they understand that if they have a product on the shelves and have it next to another product that has more sugar in it, then they're unlikely to make money off that product. So they are actively creating metabolic symptoms, obesity, fatty liver disease, because the system dictates that they have to make more money. And I guess you could argue the same thing happens with the fossil fuel industry. They have spent billions of dollars investing into infrastructure to extract these fossil fuels, and so they want to recoup that money, so they will do whatever they can to get that money back, which includes mass misinformation campaigns, political lobbying, again, because they want to win at this rule of the game. And unfortunately, I think what we're seeing now is that this game and this setup, this architecture of the system is also affecting even our social media platforms and the way we interact and converse and share ideas. What started out as quite an idealistic model in a lot of ways of the way we would share information online has been hijacked by the same mechanisms of that game. So you have Facebook and these types of platforms which are now the more sort of outrageous the content, the more inflammatory it is, then that they've optimized their algorithms to support that, so they get more likes and more shares, and that creates more revenue and data for them, which makes them more money and pleases the shareholders. So at every facet, this system unfortunately is doing us damage. There's no doubt that it's also had benefits to billions of people, but I think we've reached the limits now. We're seeing so many of our ecological and social boundaries under threat. Socially, we're seeing enormous levels of income inequality, which is leading to all sorts of destabilisation. But also ecologically, we're consuming about 100 billion metric tonnes of resources every year now. That's minerals and metals and livestock and forests and fossil fuels, and the planet can only sustain 50 billion. So we're using double that. We're seeing increasing ocean acidification, 30% more acidic than it was 150 years ago. We're seeing, we're probably going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. Our topsoils have only got 60 years left. So all of these are symptoms, and not to mention climate change, of something that is flawed, deep down, fundamentally flawed. And we just seem to be blind to that. You think right now there's about $80 trillion of GDP in the system of goods and services, and a growth percentage of 3% on that is about $2.5 trillion. And that $2.5 trillion is the GDP of the UK. So we're putting a UK's worth of resources, all the plastics and the minerals and metals, into the system. And then of course that increases that, so it gets larger and larger exponentially. So we're sort of almost doubling the economy every 20 years, which is just impossible to maintain the living systems because of that impact. So the great challenge is what to do about that. What are the solutions? I think that I've spent the last 5 years trying to find some of those solutions, and it's extraordinary to see what is actually out there. And I think whatever system we look at designing next, I think we should prioritise sort of interconnectedness, the way that nature works, these symbiotic relationships, and obviously be far less extractive than we have been. And a solution that does pop up quite regularly is this idea of localization. We've developed this very complicated system now. It's highly complex, and so to try and make decisions from a centralised organisation or administration just isn't how it works. And I think we're seeing that a lot of pushback, a lot of people pushing more to the right in their politics right around the world, is this cry out for more empowerment at a local level. They're sick of these decisions being made by corporations that are thousands of kilometres away from their own region, where they understand the nuance and what's required in their particular community. So the more that we can localise and give people back that power at that local level, I think we're going to see huge changes, not only environmentally, but also to the social fabric of what we're creating. We need to be more resilient, create more localised food, and obviously that's going to have an impact on the environment. But also energy now. We've got the technology to really make ourselves more energy independent. We're seeing it right through some of the developing countries, these sort of microgrid technologies, which is not only creating that resilience if the main grid goes down due to natural disasters, but the money also gets to stay within the economy and not go to a large energy company elsewhere, which is really important. And I'd also argue that we have an opportunity to localise some of our governance, that this idea of people feeling frustrated by this disempowerment. Really interesting ideas emerging around participatory democracy, participatory budgeting, where the community is allocated a certain amount of money from the council and they get to decide what they want to do with that money, how to spend it in their community, what things will actually make their region a better place to live. So I see amongst myriad of different solutions around the world that localisation is right there. That's something that people are desperate for. We've done multiple screenings of 2040 around the world now. This is my recent documentary, including council screenings with breakaway groups where different leaders of the community sort of request and put up a vision of what they want by 2040. And overwhelmingly, the response is about more community resilience and regeneration and strength, more empowerment at that local level where people are living. And I think that's kind of, again, that's how nature works. If you think of our own human bodies, the liver plays a vital role, the heart plays a vital role, all our cells play a crucial role. They're all separate, but they're all contributing to a larger, functioning, healthy ecosystem. And I think that's the way we've got to look at this moving forward. So it's not the only answer. There's lots of solutions, and I think we need to be careful about delineating between localism and nationalism. They're two very different things. I think nationalism sometimes wants to be sort of local at the exclusion of all else. But I think localism is actually about contributing to a better, greater whole while also having more power at a local level.